Aquarian Conspiracy, and it's not a mystery story. The subtitle of Personal and Social Transformations in the 80s. It's an important book to society. Furthermore, it speaks to our college school philosophy because it affirms what we're about. It establishes links with the recent research on the right-left hemispheres of the brain, and describes and reinstates a larger view of man and his capacities. In short, it offers, to me, a fresh perspective on the basics. 2,000 years ago, for example, the Apostle Paul admonished the Romans, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Marilyn Ferguson's new book would have held few surprises for Paul. This is because in many ways, the book points us toward recovering that larger view of man that we have lost in the past 2,000 years. David, before Paul, hinted at it in verse. When I consider the heavens and the work of thy hands, what is man, that thou art mindful of him? David and Paul had inspired views of man, of his infinite capacity to love, to empathize, to seek one's own and another's good, and of his capacity to create, to reflect, to analyze, to stick to it when the going is tough, to live with humor and joy. Let us briefly look at how our view of man has evolved since Paul. Western culture has gradually taken a more and more narrow view of man. For Paul, the word mind encompassed all of man. Feelings and thinking, or in educationese, the affective and the cognitive. And the mind was metaphorically and physically synonymous with the heart. But Western culture more recently has divided the heart and the mind, glorifying the mind, particularly with the ascendance of science. We have glorified the logical and rational, and diminished in value the intuitive, the feeling, and the spiritual side of man. The logical, rational philosophy has so narrowed our view of man that we all too easily assume that we can know the whole from its parts, and that truth is quantifiable. It has portrayed life as black and white, either or. It has valued certainty over change and content over process. It has brought us the back to basics movement, management by objectives, and standardized tests. And we have lost much in the process. Our schools in particular have reflected this narrow view of man, and the narrower we get, the less effective we are. Our schools have tended to focus almost exclusively on left brain functions, on the logical and rational, and have neglected and devalued the right brain functions of intuition, insight, imagination, integration, and synthesis, of seeing the pattern of things, of getting a feel for how something works, or getting a sense of the nature of something, like a culture or a mathematical function. Minimal competency tests, like Missouri's BEST test, are not concerned with these qualities. Now let us turn briefly to the effect of this narrow view on the individual. Doug Heath, a psychologist from Haverford College, has undertaken 25 years of longitudinal study with groups of people from youth to mature adulthood. He's also done research in 700 schools, both public and private. Among other things, he is interested in what makes an effective, fully functioning adult, and what are the determinants, particularly the school determinants, of the healthy adult. His findings include qualities which characterize a fully functioning adult. He's ordered these qualities according to their significance. 1, a sense of humor. 2, self-confidence. 3, a cluster of qualities: altruism, caring, passion, empathy. 4, energy, enthusiasm. 5, commitment, persistence. 6, honesty. One of his clearest findings is that there is no correlation in academic achievement in the grades, SAT scores, or rank in class. In fact, extremely high academic achievement is very often negatively correlated with being a healthy adult. This is not to say that academic excellence is unimportant, but by itself, without the development of other human dimensions, academic achievement can be dysfunctional. Parents are more than pleased if their high schooler gets a 750 instead of a 600 on their SAT. But if the 750 is achieved at the expense of the rest of the self, then Heath's research shows that we may well end up with a crippled adult. A comment is in order here about gifted education and giftedness. Briefly, gifted refers to exceptional quality in any area of human development. Math, writing, organizing information, facilitating a group working on a project or in a game, sensitivity to others' feelings, singing, dancing, drawing, use of metaphors and humor, listen, and so on. Our goal at College School is to bring out and develop the giftedness that is in each of us, and to do so in such a way that is not at the expense of the other dimensions of the individual. This does not mean that each child has to be excellent in all dimensions. It does mean nurturing all aspects, each aspect to its fullest, and accepting, indeed celebrating, each individual child, his or her wonderful uniqueness. At the College School, we feel education must be about the whole of man, not just the rational or logical side. Nurturing the whole child, we believe, leads to more effective academic learning. The Back to Basics movement, on the other hand, increases the amount of school time devoted to a frontal attack on a narrow concept of 3 R's. Yet test scores are declining, kids are reading less, and are less mathematically competent. We believe this is directly related to an isolated skill orientation without context, activity which has little meaning for the child. It is activity disconnected from experience. And where does significant meaning come from? Experience. The educator James Coleman wrote that today's kids are information rich and experience poor. Marilyn Ferguson points out that between the time today's college students enter an engineering degree program and the time they leave, much of the information that they have learned is outdated. Being information rich doesn't get you much. On the other hand, experience, if it is structured to be nurturing, reflective, and challenging, will also lead to being adaptive and flexible, being autonomous. From experience evolves meaning with roots in our whole self. The 3 R's need to be embedded in experience. We need to develop 3 R's fully in each child, in the context of his or her experience. And it is not just the 3 R's that are basic. At the College School, we broaden the concept of basics to include science, music, art, dance, physical education, interpersonal skills, group skills, and not just skills and knowledge, but the ability to pursue something on your own and to feel the joy of doing it well. We broaden greatly what is basic, and we embed it in experience. Now I'd like to move from the abstract to the concrete and share with you a college school experience. I had joined some of our kids, the 6th grade and the new 7th graders, on the wilderness experience, a week-long outdoor adventure. This experience in many ways epitomizes some of the most important things we're after with kids and how we go about it. That is, our experiential approach. It is important to note that our experiential approach is not only outdoor adventure, although outdoor adventure is one of our most powerful experiential vehicles. Most of what we do is experiential, from our language experience approach to reading and writing to the 4th and 5th grade play. I share this particular experience with you because of its power and clarity. I had arrived just before dark. Monday night, the kids, as well as their sleeping bags and gear, had been soaked. Tuesday, they canoed on Devil's Kitchen Lake, which in the late fall is absolutely beautiful. They canoed to a very special place called Panther's Den, which has some of the most spectacular rock formations in the Midwest. They arrived at Panther's Den Tuesday evening, literally minutes before another storm hit, this time to be enjoyed in the protection of a dry shelter bus. Wednesday, they canoed back, and I found them at dusk, shortly after they arrived on a finger of land sticking out into the lake. The teachers had put them out on solo for the night. Each student having a small, relatively flat spot somewhere on the wooded hillside, just big enough for their ground cloth, sleeping bag, and backpack, in which they carried all they had for 1 week, and a candle. Yes, imagine your child out there on solo, alone for the night. Let me share with you the thoughts from Jason's journal, written earlier that day. Tonight is solo night. I hope we aren't too far from each other. I don't want to be alone tonight. I want to be with at least one other person. But another part of me wants to be alone because I'm not very courageous and I need to be a little braver. If I'm alone tonight, it will make me into a braver person. Before putting the kids out on solo, we all sat and talked. Jan Phillips, our outdoor leader, shared Jason's journal entries with the rest of the kids, and we talked some. As staff, we had expected that as many as 10 of the 18 kids would balk at solo and insist on duos. But the group's discussion, the sharing of Jason's journal, the recognition that we all had similar fears, and the recognition that we each had the ability to reach inside for strength, had every child opting for solo. Once out on solo, there were a few tears. But the next morning, after the experience, they felt so good about their accomplishments. My dad won't believe I did it. That night I fell asleep gazing up through trees at a blanket of stars unseen by city eyes. At dawn, I rolled over to look out through some oak brush, turning autumn yellow over a mist-covered lake backdropped by an orange horizon. And like David, I sang, "When I consider the heavens and the work of thy hands." And I felt enlarged and filled with a sense of wonder, a sense of peace and joy and power. We want our kids to experience and value these feelings of peace, joy, and power. This can come when we let go of our narrow view of man in order to be touched by something larger, by a sense of wonder, or someone else's insight, Jason's journal. Or back at school, listening to the teacher read to us a favorite like Winnie the Pooh or Wind in the Willows. A second grader wrote recently that Pooh was simple, but not dumb. And she was larger for the insight, and her writing had meaning. Growth comes when we reach down inside to do something we didn't think we could do. Going on solo when you're very much afraid. Or the next day, rappelling off a 110-foot cliff. It comes from hearing others' words of encouragement as we struggle with our fear and weakness in climbing that cliff. "Come on, John, you can do it." "Yeah, John, you did it." How do we feel when we did something we didn't think we could do? What does it mean? A poem we share a lot with kids, particularly in the outdoors, by a couple brothers, Kenny and Rennie Russell, reads, "So why do we do it? What good is it? Does it teach you anything, like determination, invention, improvisation, foresight, hindsight, love, art, music, religion, strength or patience or accuracy or quickness or tolerance, or which wood will burn, and how long is a day, and how far is a mile, and how delicious is water and smoky green pea soup, and how to rely on yourself?" One of our students, as a 7th grader, had an answer. "The Ant" by Carol Davis. As I watch the ant move quietly in the grass, I wonder where he's going, what he is doing. Maybe he's looking for the ideal spot to build a home. Or maybe he's trying to find some food. Then I think of me, about to tackle the 100-foot cliff. Where am I going? What am I doing? Why is it so important for me to make it to the top of this cliff? There is nothing spectacular waiting for me up there. Maybe a few trees and a nice view, so what? I now notice a path leading up to the top of the cliff. Why don't I take up that path up? It would be much easier. and I would still see the trees in the view. But something wouldn't feel right that way. Feel. Could it possibly be a feeling that might be waiting for me at the top of that cliff? Yes, I've had that feeling before. When finishing a paper, or finally getting a tent set up. It's the feeling of accomplishment. Now I know why it wouldn't feel right to take the path. The feeling of accomplishment wouldn't be there because I hadn't used everything I had to get to the top of that cliff. The thought of the ant came back to me. Could it be that he was after a feeling of accomplishment too? Maybe it's important to him too, I wonder. I'm a seventh grader. How to rely on yourself. Can you use reading skills to find out something for yourself? Can you evaluate how you did some activity, something you wrote, how well you organized something, a drawing, a piece you played on the organ instruments, your part in a social studies research project, your teamwork in a hockey game? Or you need someone else to tell you how you did. Autonomy. Learning the attitudes and skills that enable you to rely on yourself. And knowing when you need help. Accepting it and feeling good about that too. One side of the coin, developing into a fully functioning human being, is how to rely on yourself. The other side is developing other-centeredness. Reaching out, recognizing other and different values, different needs, different strengths and weaknesses, and recognizing that much of what we do in life is with others, and that many of our needs can best be met in concert with others, not in competition against or regardless of others. John Dewey said, learning is a social experience. Indeed it is, and so at the college school, we structure learning to take advantage of this fact, not disregard it. We often have kids working in twos or threes or small groups, rather than individual goals. I want to pull out and make that the crucial relation. In fact, it is as if they had something which had to be expressed. In fact, the process of expressing something is often our means of making sense of it. For example, one of the above journal writers was not often punctual or thorough, but handed in this journal on time with much more writing than normal. And a graduate student once wrote in an outdoor adventure class we taught, never had I learned so much without opening a book. Now I'm ready to go back, to open the books, and to find out why. This is the internal motivation of experience brought to academic tasks. Finally, I want to cite one more aspect of our philosophy, an aspect which is necessary in reaching the whole child. This is having a developmental view. The developmental view sees growth as uneven within the individual and unique between individuals. It sees that it is abnormal for a child to progress evenly across the various aspects of his or her wholeness. A child may read easily, but develop the small motor skills to write much later, or vice versa. A child may be engulfed in fantasy and not be ready for the left brain task of reading and computation until much later. There's a parable called The Problem of the Hickory Tree, which makes an important developmental point. Each spring, with the coming of warm breezes and the rains, nature buds forth in all her splendor. Yet when the spring flowers are blooming and all the other trees have leaves, the hickory persists in its dull winter garb of shaggy gray. Still, in its own way and in its own time, the hickory tree too blossoms with its own unique expression of beauty and strength. Mother Nature's nurturing has not only included warm breezes and rain, it has also included patience. Perhaps there is an important parallel here with how we as parents and teachers deal with kids. Do we believe that like the hickory tree, our kids, given a loving and nurturing environment, will blossom? Each in his own time, that they will learn to express their feelings, to think of others, to be responsible, on the parent of an adolescent. Sometimes patience is real important. To become readers and problem solvers, to be themselves. It seems to me that as parents and teachers, we can always use a bit more patience and trust. And humility. Yes, humility too is an essential part of effective parenting and teaching. After intensive work with a group of college school kids, I found myself reaching for words which would express this dimension of our work with children. Watching kids grow, becoming their own people, loving them, feeling such joy in their laughter and triumphs, wanting to help that growth, yet knowing that so much of what must be done is there to do. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, like, you really probably got into your presentation, and I think you were really very much on target.
We need more coffee and sodas.
Could you talk a little about how the philosophy translates into differences in college school classrooms versus in public school classrooms? Well, what happens every day here that is different than what happens every day in the public school? How is the philosophy translating into a different approach, not on the week-long rules, the special events, on a regular basis?
Well, I guess one example would be around kids' writing. Where it comes from, which tends to be their experience, what they're doing, the amount of that writing, the kind of the sense that it has to come from them, not only from in the sense of their experience, but come from them in terms of where they are with their expression of words on paper. The whole inventive spelling dimension. There's a very specific construct that Piaget has. He describes as the child's construction of knowledge. That the child has to construct knowledge himself. We can't give that to them. And you see that very specifically in inventive spelling. You see where the child is struggling to figure out how to put this thing that he's used, language, on paper. And instead of giving them our thing, standard spelling, letting them struggle with their own sort of phonetic statement and putting that down and accepting that and celebrating that for the child, giving them time to work through that stage. Another aspect comes out in the dialogue work that kids are doing. They do this mainly first grade on up, where it's a structured process of looking very intensely at some experiences. In first grade, for instance, the kids are doing experiments on the water cycle. And what this process does is get them to look carefully at that, to share their observations, share hypotheses about what they're seeing. For instance, one stage in one of three experiments is dropping some cold water on a hot frying pan. And then the kids are asked, well, what happened, why? And in one year's dialogue, the kids were talking about, one of the child says, well, I think the water went up to heaven. And his friend looks at her and he says, what do you mean, it went to heaven? The first child thought about it and said, well, it went up as far as heaven. Can't you see it? Can you see the child constructing the knowledge? The metaphor was wrong the first time. The idea was kind of right. Didn't communicate it, so they worked with each other. So that's working in the small groups. It's giving those children a chance to work with that concrete experience of seeing that the water evaporate, and it's giving them plenty of time to talk about that. They go for an hour at a time sometimes in a large group after they met in small groups, just trying to figure out what they saw. Now for a 6-year-old wiggly kid, that's pretty darn good. And so I guess I think one of the main things is that quality of engagement that comes out of bringing experience into the classroom. Not asking kids to sit and do workbooks and other kinds of things, but get them engaged and let those minds go to work. And I think that there's a single thing that I guess differentiates. I think that's it.
Peter, do you find or have heard comments that indicate there's a discernible difference between the college school graduates and, say, the graduates in other schools that you get perhaps from educators beyond 7th grade or however long that?
Well, I don't know really, I guess I'm not sure it gets addressed quite that way. Our kids do awfully well in terms of acceptance beyond the school. I think it's about 8 out of 10 get first choice schools. They're in most of the top schools in town. We have kids doing really well. I think our kids are looked at by other schools as bringing something fairly special. I get a sense of that. It's not quite stated maybe as you said it, but that's the feeling I get from other heads. The track record is really amazing and what's happening. And that's both from our academically outstanding kids. Right now, the president of the student body at Burroughs is a college school graduate. She just got early admissions to Harvard, and the top kid in the 10th grade at Country Day is a college school kid. But we also have a child that went through here, went on to Brentwood High School, and is now at the College of the Deaf in Washington. And I think that Penny is probably as big a success as we've ever had. She was here about 4 years and came with no confidence as a hearing impaired child, and left with really a strong sense of self. Another one of our graduates is, I think about 20 now or 21 or something. He's not going to high school. While he was in high school at Brentwood, he founded the Splash Stores. And I don't know how many entrepreneurs we have around these days, but one of them's a college school graduate, and that's a kid who came in here, again, with nothing, and after about 4 years, came out of here ready to do that kind of thing. So, and that's part of our diversity. And,
I'm interested in how you educate parents about what you're doing, and maybe educating people in the community, because I think the school is so unique in the model and the ideology that it might be kind of scary to outsiders about what's really going on in this school. And I'm just kind of curious as to how you encounter. How do you educate people as to what you're doing? And including maybe many parents here, too.
Well, I guess we have a meeting like this. I hope our newsletter makes some effort at that. I don't know. I guess that's probably something worth exploring more than we have the various pop-up kinds of evenings with the classes in the fall.
I guess I maybe even meant more than that. How do you transmit your ideology, or is that an appropriate word? How do you share that information?
Oh, well, we do that in some other ways. I guess I was tuning into parents. We are quite engaged through what we call the College School Institute. We're trying to work with teachers in other schools and to help them work more experientially, more individualized ways. We worked with about 35 public and private schools in the last 3 years on 2 projects called the Great Rivers and the Landmarks projects. And these are projects which attempt to get students into the community. The guidelines of the project require that schools commit to getting students out on field trips. We've provided all kinds of resource people through lots of agencies that are exist in the community, which very few people take advantage of, from the Missouri Historical Society, the Coast Guard. Coast Guard is a phenomenal resource to kids and teachers with regard to the rivers. So that's one set of kind of activities, and we're continually exploring ways to reach out and do that on the problem of resources and how much we can do and how much we can get. Because much of what we're doing runs against the direction of where American education is today. No question about it. I think there's some slight movement backwards near the direction of the pendulum now, but it's real slight. I'd be real open for ideas.
I was just wondering how you made your impact felt in the community and with other.
Well, the College School Institute is the major vehicle for doing that, and that's been done through the series of sort of in-service relationships with teams of teachers and principals in schools. We'd like to do much more. Yeah.
I think in hearing that Joe's question was, and then your name said, I'm kind of hearing maybe it's my own fears or anxiety too, that kind of the philosophy of education right now being so test score oriented, and what you really have beautiful, and it was really a beautiful description of humanistic education, but because of that, it's difficult to measure, those things. And such a society that really wants things a lot of time. And I think that that's part of, what is difficult. I mean, part of it is we want to see that our graduates are the best, but what does that mean? I read a silly study recently about women that became successes, and they all went to, after fourth grade, they went to all-girls school, and then they became head of Fortune 500 companies, and that was their criterion of success. And, I mean, what you're talking about is that fully functioning human being, that's not criteria of success. But still, you do fit into that society at large, and we're talking about almost two different value systems. And so I think that's where some of my anxiety comes from, that I love that, that's why I'm here, is for that philosophy. But then there's this anxiety, and is my kid going to be at grade level or, feeling.
I think the track record of our kids in getting into the top schools in St. Louis speaks for itself on that. There are two things about admissions in those schools. One is that you're talking about. Okay? And our kids do fine and dealing with those tests. They also are all interested in the other aspect of kids. And I think that's one of the major reasons why our kids do so well. They do okay in the tests, and they bring other real strong qualities. And they go on and thrive in those schools. Amy, you wanted to respond to that one?
I just wanted to talk from my experience having a daughter who's a freshman out of this year. That what I see in her is, I believe the college school really gave her the life skills that she needs. And she has adjusted without method. I see her doing is being very confident in herself, knowing herself very well, knowing her learning styles, so that when she's given a big project, she knows how to really schedule that out. She knows how she likes to do it. Nothing's threatening to her. She feels very comfortable writing. And here's a social thing that I think she got here. That there was a party this last weekend, and she wasn't invited to it, and she had some friends over the night before, and I took them to this party, and they said, oh, you want to go? Come on, let's go. And she said, no, I really don't want to go. I'm not that good friends with those kids having that party, and I really don't want to go. I want to spend my time doing this other thing. So that, socially, I think she does a beautiful adjustment. And she's very well liked, and English teacher is right here. I don't know if you're second that, but I just see her, but I just see her really being very capable and feeling very whole, and being able to really make the decisions that she needs to make, and doing them with very good judgment. So I like to tell people, and I love to do parent tours for this reason, that that is a big question. And I just think that the school here, with all the experiences that they have, really gives them and makes them very capable young people. And I don't know if you've heard this doctor who's talking now about the importance of giving our children the life skills they need. And that it's very important that we enable them to become capable young people. His name is Dr. Glenn, and he's going around the country now. And I really believe the college school really gives children that self-knowledge, that self-esteem, and the ability to make decisions for themselves that are good decisions. And that is just critical as they move on into high school and college. So I just wanted to say that half these
That's life skills, right?
I would follow up on that. She is a wonderful girl. And that's what she, I wanted to say, one of my aims was they had to write a fantasy, and the wilderness experience was the basis. You know, and it was fun because I knew exactly what you were talking about. But that was the kernel. It was, again, talking about something you know, your language is better. It was a fantasy built around that, the kernel experience. Also, for some of the young parents, we've got kids kind of spread out in time. I think I'd go back to one of your last statements, and I'm saying it to myself too, I think, is we need to trust our children more. That if we, all the anxieties I hear, we really trust that our kids will be okay if we give them that. They really will. It's just that, they'll have some mistakes, but they'll be okay.
Peter, I wanted Amy to go ahead and say, you too had those same fears. Correct?
Correct.
You were wondering, is she on grade level? How is she doing? Is she not at the same level with others in another school system? And I think that's a typical response for every parent to have. But what you found out, not only was she on grade level, she was above herself. And that's the exciting thing behind it.
Thanks.
I didn't know if Jan was still here or not. One of the things doing tours that I am often asked by prospective parents is, where do the kids go? How do they go from this type of environment into a normal? I don't know what you not a college school environment. And one day in doing tours, I always rely on Jan when I get to the middle school. And her answer to a lady, her reply was, if I can't see you, but if I am correct, was, if we do what we hope to do for the child by the time they leave here, they have not only learned their basics, but they have the confidence to try, and the desire. We have given them the desire and the encouragement to learn. That learning is fun, and they really enjoy it. And they have not only the desire to learn, but the confidence, and that they will succeed if they want to. Am I correct? Very good. And I thought that really kind of put it in a nutshell. It was a very simple answer to a difficult question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a typical example or not, but my guess is that Carla's forgotten the vast majority of everything that I learned while I was in school, the informational and tactical part of it. But I'm confident that the part that has stayed with me is having gone through some places that emphasized confidence and the ability to sort out and solve problems. And those are the things that seem to me keep working on a repeated basis when most of the information, because I don't have the memory, is gone, long gone, and probably outdated.
There's one other thing that Peter attended a leadership St. Louis session a couple of years ago. And one of the things that came out of that, I keep coming back to, because to me this is so important. Leaders in education and leaders in business got together and started talking to each other to say, if we could look at what we would like for students to get when they came out of schooling, what would it be? And the list that they came up with sounds like they graduated from the college school. But they want you to be risk takers, open to new ideas, so you can look at a situation from different perspectives. And throughout our schooling, we try to get kids where they do look at different perspectives. They want kids who are good at expressing themselves both written and orally, being able to stand up, to address, to write. Those are two skills that we use all the time at the college school. I would say that Peter addressed that early on. Writing is something that is very important to us as a reflective part of what we do. And another one that I think is so important, they want them to work together in a team. You know, in many school systems, if you work together, it's called cheating. We really encourage where kids do get together and try to solve problems jointly. Those are pluses. And I think that it is important to look at a different way of training kids, but that is an exciting way, and indeed a way that many disciplines are also looking at kids.
Another question that brought you into the faculty here. How, as a parent, do you support it at home? What would be the ideal kind of parenting response to homework or projects or, whatever? I mean, I can learn very different. This is right, this is wrong, really dead, because you can't realize you spell it correctly, so how do we interact?
Well, I know, for instance, Seal and Susie in first grade, one of the things they are very directive with their parents about in terms of kids' written work is that you're not worried about their spelling. It's really ironic when our child first starts to talk, we're probably worried about the fact they don't say it quite like we do. We'll always care about is they're saying something, they're trying to communicate something, and we respond. But the first piece of writing comes along, and we're so concerned about how it's spelled, and we're not worried about what they're trying to say to us, and that's what kills writing early on. So we ask parents not to react and not to give correct spelling. I don't think there's an ideal way to deal with homework or deal with it at home. Depends on the child. I guess probably pretty often we got to be patient and we got to not be concerned. And that's real hard sometimes. The kids are struggling a little. It's hard when they're struggling for us as teachers to not just be jumping into it. But there isn't an ideal way. I guess being interested is real important. Year after year at school, I think there's a few things going up at school occasionally to make a statement about how important school is to the child. That's a statement. I don't know how to generalize though about homework, school more than that. I think we got to help them by encouraging them to stay with things and not do things for them. Sure, they can't both. Real good communication with us at school.
I'm curious, probably a good thing my wife isn't here tonight, but she's 100% sold on the college school. But I tend to question things, I guess, because that's my science background. But I've always been interested in the fact that you seem to have conducted an experiment by a certain way you teach the children here. But I've always been curious as to the extent and how you measure the success of the experiment that you've carried out through the duration that you've been educating them while they were here. For example, you say, well, they've been accepted at so many schools and so forth and so on, but have you ever put out a questionnaire to the alumni or people who attended maybe a short time here to find out how they felt about this and how is their response different from other students who attended other schools, and get some measure as to how well you succeeded in your goals in educating those children.
We've done that on a limited basis. For several years, we were interested, particularly when we first started or went out through middle school, about how the kids made the adjustment to high school. And so we had questionnaires that went out to kids at the end of their first semester in 9th grade. So what we were after was, how did that adjustment go? They went from small, nurturing, very individualized college school to the big real world, okay? And they went to, whether it were John Burroughs or Webster High School, they went to a much more, it didn't matter where they went to a more traditional, much larger school. And we were interested in how they did. And Jan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but consistently, one, kids were doing well. They had two problems in adjustment that, for the most part, took place in the first, were handled by the end of the first quarter or first semester. One was the size socially. You know, they'd gone from a very small nurturing environment where they knew everybody, knew all the teachers, often on a first name basis, and all of a sudden they knew almost nobody in this huge sea of people. All of them moved very quickly in lots of directions, and they had to kind of make some friends and get established. And until they made a few of those friends, they didn't have their feet in the ground, and that took them at least a quarter, sometimes a semester. And the other thing was they're used to all kinds of feedback. By middle school, our kids sit in on conferences. In fact, are really often the major part of the conference is the child dealing with issues and priorities and self-evaluating. So by middle school, our kids are very used to having a sense of what their own strengths and weaknesses are, what their needs are, how they learn. They get to high school, and what do they get? They get an A or a B or a C. And that's all the feedback that comes in the loop. You know, there's not a whole lot of feedback. But I think our kids have learned initiative, and they learn how to go and get that information. Because you can't learn a lot from getting a B or an A or a C. I mean, you just don't know much about the whys, and that's what's important. And that takes kids about a quarter or a semester to use to. So, at least in terms of that specific issue of the transition, we have some fairly good knowledge. We haven't done more than that. I wish we had. We have a fair bit of anecdotal information from alums now. We're working harder and harder at getting in touch with alums, and are going to continue to do more with that. I hope we're going to have the resources at some point. It's very costly in terms of manpower to do any kind of real follow-up studies. I mean, I would love to have some sense about where all our early graduates are, and where they went to college, and what they did afterwards, and how they're feeling about that. I hope someday we can. That's a big effort. Just trying to find them is a big effort. The first, 25 minus 8, 17 years of the school, we were the laboratory school at Webster College. We had no relationship to alums, essentially. That was not sort of part of the role of the school, was sort of creating any kind of alum group or anything. And we didn't have any kind of we're just putting together rough lists and stuff. So that's an agenda. That's one of the things Sandy gets to do in his spare time. Try to figure out where our alums are and get them together. Have a board member that's taking some initiative on that. Sandy.
I just wanted to kind of dig into what Chris was saying. This summer we did send out a questionnaire through the newsletter that everybody gets, but the ones that went to the alum, we put a questionnaire into those that said, where are you now? What are you doing? What did the college school mean to you? And it's interesting how, whether it be someone who was in medical school at one of the Ivy League schools, or someone who was stripping furniture in Boulder, Colorado, in the mountains. It was interesting to see how many of them, the reply to what did the college school mean to you is, I wonder what type of person I would have been if I hadn't gone to the college school and I like the person I am. And I think that speaks to a number of things that have been said here today. It doesn't matter whether we're measuring them in terms of A's and B's and the game everybody plays in terms of getting into the big Ivy League schools, or whether we're just looking for someone, or we have a student who's just looking for inner peace with themselves. It seems that from the questionnaires we're getting back, their first 8, 7, or how many years they have been at the college school has meant an awful lot to these kids, and now as adults to them. I mean, I could not say to you that my elementary school what I could say a big impression in my life, except I remember a lot of dark clothes, long skirts, But other than that, I just was overwhelmed with the response where they said, I wonder whether it be, the different ways, it was said in different ways, but I wonder what type of person I would have been if I hadn't had the fortunate experience of being at the college school.
I think that's a really interesting statement because think back, how many of you go back to visit your grade school? If you go back to visit your high school or your college, right? This year, we have had more students, not just this year, that do come back and say, gosh, I just really remember you all, and you did so much for me that I want to come and see what the school was like again. I think that's important. And I wanted to add one thing onto the things that we get feedback from kids as they leave us. Not only do they find it difficult to work in the large groups, the other thing, and probably the thing that I would put first on your list that I hear, is that the creativeness that they were allowed and the way they were able to solve their own problems or design any of their own things is lacking for them. And so that input of being able to be as creative, that's sort of a plus and a minus all at once. It's a plus in that we feel we really are creative and we give them a lot of that opportunity, but it's sort of a sad commentary that they're not finding it in other places.
Well, what kind of feedback do you get from high school the report cards? You know, I mean, true, they're not A's or B's, but what you say in the report card, you tell every aspect of everything that's gone on in that class for the time that the child was in there. I mean, I would think that people viewing their records would be thrilled to know that much about a child.
Actually, it took us quite a while to get high school guidance counselors to read the records. We really had to work with that. I mean, they weren't used to it. They were used to, I commented in my talk about the quantification of things. They were used to the essence of kids being some grades and some test scores. We worked on that real hard. And we worked on establishing relationships with the schools, particularly the schools that our kids go most often. And I think now that they are ready, and they are ready. I think in addition, one of the things those schools have found is that it really pays to read carefully the very thorough recommendations that our teachers write for the kids. They know we're going to be honest with them, one thing, because we had a time not recommended kids for certain schools. So we felt it was not the right kind of choices for that child, the best interest of that child. And but for the most part, we can fully recommend kids, and they get a whole picture of a child. So it's taken some work, and that was the early years of the middle school. But I think now that we've overcome for the most part. Now I heard a story this year that I still need to follow up on about one of the top schools in town, and the child has been accepted, but the implication of a couple of questions to the child in the interview with the family, when the child and the family was there, was that this sort of strange place you went to school, kind of unusual place, and just what it said to me was they need to know a little more about us. The child's been accepted, and so it wasn't a total negative thing in a way, but it was clear that they had to sort of picture the weird place out there, and so we still have work to do on that, helping them understand how we work and what we're about. But it wasn't the problem at the beginning. Okay?
So you didn't say really a whole lot about the thematic part, but a couple of comments. It seems to me that those team-oriented projects that go on here at the school make quite an impact, at least from my perspective, on the interest and willingness to learn things, not just while that team's going on, but carrying on after it. Going back to the question or a comment made earlier about how parents can kind of tie into what's going on at school at home. We brought Logan a globe for Christmas this year, one of the first countries outside the United States to be identified with Japan because of the team that's going on in Japan. And this summer we have mapped out plans to build a true full-scale Indian teepee out in Colorado as a result of this Indian thing and the model tent that we had built for the project. I think that stuff, and maybe the idea of the journals and carrying that idea through summer vacations and time at home and other things that they do, but I think picking up on that and encouraging those themes and the interest that's created in learning stuff around them is
And I might add something to that. And it kind of it speaks to a critical root of our work. In fact, the root of those themes. Back in 1974, it was, when we were at the college. The college sent Jan to a workshop run by Outward Bound for teachers in the metropolitan area. It wasn't going off somewhere. They did a week's experiences here. And Jan came back from that workshop. We were in our August meetings, and she had missed some of them. She came in, and it was a couple of days before we could understand what she was talking about, because all she could say was neat and super, and she was hired that night.
Terrific, colossal, wonderful.
That fall, she got one of the workshop leaders to take spend one day with our kids on what was at that time our 6th grade camp out, and they went rock climbing that day. And I'd never seen rock climbing at all, and Jan got me to come out and see what was going to happen this day. Well, what we saw that day really was a very much of a turning point for what we do in thematic work. Because what we saw was kids engaged at an extraordinary level and supporting each other at an extraordinary level. And we said to ourselves, we have to find more ways to make that happen with kids, particularly in the older grades. The roots of the school go back into what was called the integrated day work in the British infant schools. That has roots in Dewey's progressive work, progressive era. And for the most part, almost all the successes in the progressive movement and in the British infant schools and in the early open education work in this country, the big successes were almost all in primary school and making work with the primary grades. And little was done successfully in the older kids. And we looked at that day and we said, what are we going to do to engage kids in that level? And out of that came the theme work. And there's a number of qualities of that theme work that I think make for a very different kind of engagement. It's interdisciplinary, so it looks feels a whole lot more like life than what most of the traditional schools look like. Because none of us live life with reading over here and math over here and science over here. I mean, that's just not what life is about. That's not what real problems are about. So it had that quality. But it also led us to think about what else had to engage. And much of American school curriculum today is very much oriented at coverage. You know, and there's nothing a whole lot more boring than coverage. You know, you just don't learn and get a feeling for things that way. And so themes are a conscious decision to give kids experiences that have enough depth that they really get a hold of something. That doesn't mean that they come away knowing every fact about 19th century American history, but they may have a very important feeling about some differences about the way people live and some of the issues they live, and some skills about how to find out about something they're interested in. So those are qualities that came out of an early experience, and they're very much what you're speaking to in terms of themes. I think they're a real important difference. Coming back to your question, Martha, about the kind of quality of experience kids get, and it's that kind of. It also exists in looking at the depth of what kids get at preschool when they go into the spaceship and all the things that are there, even a globe outside the window so they can see Earth in the spaceship. But there's a depth there of experiences that's real important, and I think that's one of the most important things we do for kids. Carol.
Well, this conversation brought to mind an artwork that was done by a group of first graders this year on the theme of brotherhood during Martin Luther King's birthday week. And even inventive spelling had come into it, where the kids had to solve a problem of deciding whose design would be enlarged and how to incorporate everybody else's design. So I brought this piece of work up down here. The kids each came up with a design that had to do with brotherhood, and one was voted on. So I just thought I would show it. Of course, there's even inventive spelling. And I had the dilemma of, should I keep it like this, or should I tell her it's spelled wrong? Spell it so everybody can see. P-E-O-L-E. People. people. And there's a lot of images of helping someone medically in emergencies. I think there's hands across America, symbols of love and care, and some Valentine's that somehow ended up on here. But this whole discussion really brought to mind this piece. And as an example of group problem solving and celebrating children's thinking processes. I just thought I'd share it with you.
That's neat, Carol. Thank you all for coming.
Really?